My name is Elise. I grew up in a small fishing town in Maine called Bar Harbor. Growing up, you'd hear whispers about Willie McGivern, the strange boy who disappeared into the woods, never to return. People say his spirit now haunts the town, angry and restless. Some older kids at school told us about the game called Willie Won't You. The game is supposed to summon his spirit with just 2 pencils and a piece of paper, asking him yes or no questions. They told us it was just a silly game, a way to pass time and spook each other out. But there was something about it that stuck with us, a nagging curiosity we couldn't shake. It seemed harmless enough at first, a mere game to pass the time. But we had no idea of the malevolent force we were about to awaken, nor the dark horrors that would soon be unleashed upon us. We set everything up in my bedroom. The pencils were placed carefully in the shape of a cross on top of a sheet of paper where we'd scrawled yes and no. As we sat down around it, we were nervous, but it was the kind of nervousness you get before a roller coaster ride, exciting and a little scary, but nothing serious. We giggled as we asked our first question, "Willie, won't you say hello?" At first, nothing happened. We exchanged looks, trying not to roll our eyes at how silly it all felt. But then, just as we were about to ask another question, the top pencil wobbled slightly. We froze, our laughter dying in our throats. Slowly, the pencil turned, its point dragging across the paper until it rested on yes. We stared at it, our hearts pounding in our chests. It wasn't supposed to actually move, right? We tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out shaky and uncertain. The air in the room felt different, thicker, heavier, but we were too scared to admit that we were scared, so we kept going. We asked another question, something simple, but the answer didn't matter. What mattered was that the pencil moved again, quicker this time, as if Willie was getting more comfortable. The room felt darker, even though the lights were still on. We began to hear strange noises, like footsteps in the hallway outside my room, but when we looked, no one was there. The lights flickered, and our nervous excitement turned to genuine fear. Shadows seemed to dance just out of sight, and we couldn't shake the feeling that something was in the room with us, something watching. When we finally decided we'd had enough, we asked Willie if we could end the game. But instead of the pencil moving to yes like we desperately hoped, it stayed still. We asked again, our voices trembling, but the pencils didn't move. Then, all at once, the room erupted into chaos. The lights flickered violently, objects started to fall from my desk, and the air felt electric, like we were in the eye of the storm. We tried to run, but it was as if the room itself was closing in on us, the door slamming shut before we could reach it. We were trapped, and we could feel it, the presence we'd summoned didn't want to leave. It didn't want to let us go. The fear was suffocating, and as we huddled together, we realized we'd made a terrible mistake. The final moments were a blur of terror and confusion, and then silence. The pencils lay still on the paper, but the air was charged with something sinister, something that hadn't been there before. As we tried to keep ourselves from shaking, the room grew impossibly cold. Our breaths came out in shallow, panicked gasps, the air visible in front of us like mist in the dead of winter. We were trapped, and we knew it, but the realization was only beginning to sink in. The door wouldn't budge, the shadows seemed to creep closer, and the silence was broken only by the faint, rhythmic sound of something tapping against the wall. Tap? 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 We turned slowly, our eyes wide with terror, toward the source of the sound. There, in the far corner of the room, the shadows seemed to gather and twist, forming a shape that was almost human but wrong in every possible way. It was as if the darkness had taken on a life of its own, stretching and bending into a figure that loomed tall and menacing. It had no eyes, no face, but we could feel it watching us, its presence suffocating, its intent malevolent. The tapping grew louder, faster, as the shadow figure inched closer. Each tap seemed to echo through our bones, the sound driving into our minds like a drill. The pencils on the paper suddenly flew off, clattering against the walls as if thrown by an unseen hand. The paper itself began to twist and curl, the words yes and no contorting into something unreadable, something evil. One of us, was it me? Let out a small, terrified whimper, and that's when it happened. The figure lunged forward, moving with unnatural speed, closing the distance between us in an instant. The room descended into madness. Lights bursting overhead, glass shattering, the air filled with a torrent of screams that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. We tried to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go, no escape from the horror we had unleashed. The figure reached out, its shadowy arm extending toward us, fingers like tendrils of darkness curling around our throats. We couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but feel the icy grip of death tightening around us. And then, just as quickly as it had started, it stopped. Silence fell over the room. The figure vanished, leaving nothing but the echo of our screams and the terrible, oppressive stillness in its wake. We were alone, but the room was different now, charged with a presence that lingered, unseen but felt. The pencils lay still on the floor, the paper crumpled and torn. The door creaked open, but neither of us dared to move. We were too terrified, too shaken by the horror we had just witnessed. The presence was still there, lurking in the corners, watching. Waiting. We knew, deep down, that we had made a mistake we could never undo. And the worst part, we didn't know what would happen next. We don't talk about what happened after that. We don't play games like Willie, won't you? Anymore, and we never will. Because sometimes, when you call out to the darkness, it answers. And once it does, there's no telling what might follow you back. If you enjoyed this chilling tale and want to hear more, be sure to like and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories. Curious about the real hauntings of Bar Harbor where Willie's story unfolded? Click the link in the description below to book a haunted tour and experience the eerie history firsthand. Terror Tour Guide.